The evening sky was painted in shades of fading gold and soft pink as Emily stood at the edge of the cracked driveway, staring up at the weathered farmhouse that had belonged to her grandmother. The house seemed to breathe history, its peeling paint and sagging porch telling stories of years long past. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth and old wood, a stark contrast to the sterile city apartment she had fled just hours before. Her hands trembled slightly as she clutched the worn leather bag at her side. The only possession she had brought with her, besides the small bundle of clothes stuffed inside. Emily was 8 months pregnant, her rounded belly a constant reminder of the future she now faced alone. The weight of the child growing inside her was both a blessing and a burden, and the silence surrounding her seemed to echo the emptiness she felt within. She had no partner to lean on, no friends to call, and a past she desperately wanted to leave behind. The decision to come here, to her grandmother's house, was born out of desperation, a final grasp for stability in a life suddenly unmoored. Before we continue, make sure to like and subscribe to never miss a new video. And tell me, where are you watching this video from? I love seeing all different people come together for these stories. She hesitated for a moment before stepping onto the porch, the wood groaning softly beneath her feet. The door was unlocked, as if awaiting her arrival, and with a deep breath, Emily pushed it open. Inside, the house smelled of dust and memories, an old, familiar scent that stirred something deep within her. The walls were lined with faded wallpaper, yellowed by time, and the furniture was covered in white sheets that billowed gently with the evening breeze sneaking through cracked windows. Emily moved through the rooms slowly, each step stirring layers of dust. The house was empty, yet it felt alive with the whispers of the past. She ran her hand along a cracked windowsill, feeling the rough texture beneath her fingers, and tried to imagine her grandmother here, laughing, cooking, living. But the only sound was the creak of the floorboards and the distant rustle of leaves outside. As she explored, her gaze was drawn repeatedly to a tall, narrow door at the end of the hallway, a door she barely remembered from childhood. It was the attic door, painted the same faded white as the walls, with a small brass keyhole gleaming faintly in the dim light. The door was firmly closed, and though she hadn't noticed it before, tonight it seemed to beckon her with an almost magnetic pull. Emily's curiosity was a flicker amidst the overwhelming fatigue she felt. She pressed her palm against the door, feeling the cool wood beneath her skin. A strange mix of anticipation and anxiety welled up inside her. What lay behind that door? Boxes filled with forgotten belongings? Old furniture draped in dust? Or perhaps something more? Secrets long buried, waiting to be uncovered? The house offered no answers, only silence and shadows. But beneath that silence, Emily felt a heartbeat, a pulse of mystery that mirrored her own tumultuous life. She was here now, alone, pregnant and vulnerable, yet something about this place stirred a glimmer of hope. It was a refuge, a hiding place from the storm raging in her mind and the uncertain world outside. She sank onto the worn steps of the staircase, cradling her belly as her thoughts spiraled. Just a few weeks ago, her life had seemed so different. The cramped apartment, the constant noise of the city, the strained smiles she forced in front of her boyfriend. None of it had prepared her for this moment, the moment when she realized she was truly alone. Her phone buzzed briefly in her bag, a message from an unknown number that she ignored. She didn't want to face anyone tonight. Not the father who had vanished, not the friends who had slowly drifted away, not even herself. This house, with its creaking floors and shadowed corners, felt like the only place where she could breathe. Emily's fingers brushed against the cool metal of a small key she had found lying on the kitchen counter earlier. It was old, tarnished, and oddly out of place. She had no idea where it came from or what it unlocked, but she had slipped it into her pocket without thinking. Now, sitting in the quiet of the hallway, the key seemed to hold a secret, perhaps even the answer to the question swirling in her mind. The house had been empty since her grandmother passed away 5 years ago. Emily had barely visited then, caught up in her own life's chaos. Now, standing here, she felt the weight of that absence more keenly than ever. The rooms were filled with echoes of laughter, of whispered conversations, of a life that had once been full and vibrant. She thought about her grandmother's hands, worn but gentle, the way she had always made Emily feel safe. The thought brought tears to her eyes, but also a strange comfort. Maybe this house was more than just wood and plaster. It was a legacy, a shelter, a place to start over. As darkness deepened outside, Emily rose slowly and approached the attic door again. Her hand trembled as she reached for the doorknob, but she did not turn it. Instead, she placed her palm flat against the cool surface and closed her eyes, imagining what might be waiting beyond. In that moment, the house seemed to breathe with her. Inhaling the weight of her fears, exhaling a quiet promise of discovery. The locked attic door was no longer just a barrier, it was a threshold. Behind it lay the unknown, a mystery that called to her like a lifeline. Emily knew her journey was only beginning. The road ahead was uncertain and fraught with challenges. But for the first time in weeks, she felt a flicker of determination. She would face whatever was hidden in the attic. She would uncover the secrets of this house, and in doing so, perhaps find the strength to face her own future. The night deepened, and the house settled into its slumber. But the attic door stood firm, waiting patiently for Emily to turn the key and step into the shadows of the past. And somewhere deep inside her, the small voice of hope whispered that this place, this old, forgotten house, might just be the refuge she needed after all. 2 weeks earlier, Emily sat on the edge of her tiny apartment bed. The soft hum of the city outside her window, a distant buzz she barely noticed. The news had settled over her like a thunderclap. She was pregnant. The positive test, bright and undeniable, had shattered the fragile calm she'd built around her chaotic life. She stared at it for what felt like hours, heart pounding, mind racing through every possibility, every fear. Her relationship with Jake had been complicated from the start, passionate but unstable, full of promises that never quite took shape. When she told him, she had hoped for support, for a steady hand to hold through the storm. Instead, his eyes had clouded with doubt and anger, and the gentle man she once knew had slipped away behind a wall of silence and blame. They fought that night, words sharp and cutting, accusations thrown like knives. "You should have told me sooner," he said, voice low and bitter. "What am I supposed to do now?" Emily's own voice cracked as she tried to explain, to plead for understanding, but the rift between them grew too wide. By morning, the apartment felt colder, emptier, as Jake packed a bag and left without a backward glance. The silence he left behind was deafening. Emily sat alone with her thoughts, the reality of impending motherhood pressing down on her like an anchor. She worked a part-time job at a local cafe, scraping by. But the weight of impending responsibility was overwhelming. The lease was due, and with no one to share the burden, the walls of her small apartment seemed to close in tighter each day. It was during one particularly bleak afternoon, while sorting through a pile of unopened bills and eviction notices, that a memory sparked. Her grandmother's house, a place she hadn't thought about in years, tucked away in a sleepy town far from the noise and chaos of the city. She remembered the warmth of its creaky floors, the scent of old books and lavender, the way sunlight spilled through lace curtains in the morning. At first, the idea seemed impossible. The house had been left abandoned since her grandmother's passing, and Emily barely remembered the place beyond fleeting childhood visits. But as the walls of her apartment closed in, and the future grew more uncertain, the thought of a refuge became a lifeline. She called a distant cousin, someone still living in the town, to ask about the house. The cousin's voice was cautious but kind. "It's been empty for years," she said. "The place needs a lot of work, but it's yours if you want it." That night, she sat with a map spread across the kitchen table, tracing the route to the house as if it were a path to salvation. The decision was terrifying, leaving behind everything familiar for a place she barely knew. But the alternative was worse. She couldn't stay where she was. Not like this. Not with the weight of the unknown pressing down on her every moment. Packing was hurried and messy. Clothes, a few cherished books, some baby items she had started to gather despite the chaos, all stuffed into bags that felt too small for the journey ahead. The city seemed to close around her as she left, the familiar streets blurring past the window of the bus that would carry her away. The journey was long and winding, the landscape shifting from towering buildings to open fields and dense woods. As the bus pulled into the small town, Emily's heart raced with a mix of fear and hope. The air smelled different here, cleaner, earthier, tinged with the scent of pine and rain. Her cousin met her at the station, a young woman with a warm smile and bright eyes, who drove her the final miles through narrow roads lined with towering oaks. The house appeared suddenly, nestled among overgrown bushes and wildflowers, its faded facade a stark contrast to the vibrant life around it. Emily felt a pang of sadness and nostalgia as she stepped onto the porch. The house was worn and weathered, its windows dusty and the garden tangled with weeds, but it held a promise she hadn't felt in weeks. A chance to start over, to find strength in roots she had almost forgotten. Inside, the silence was overwhelming, yet comforting. She moved through the rooms with tentative steps, touching the walls as if to reassure herself that this place was real, that she was really here. Memories flickered. Her grandmother's soft humming in the kitchen, the creak of the rocking chair by the window. But they felt distant, like echoes from another life. That night, as the wind whispered through the cracks in the walls, Emily lay awake, the baby stirring gently inside her. Fear gnawed at the edges of her thoughts, the uncertainty, the loneliness, the weight of responsibility. But beneath it all was a small, stubborn ember of hope. The next morning, she began to explore the house more thoroughly. The floors were layered with dust, and the air was thick with the scent of aged wood and forgotten stories. Among the clutter of old furniture and faded curtains, she discovered small traces of her grandmother's life. Photographs tucked behind a loose floorboard, a faded quilt draped over a chair, a collection of pressed flowers in a glass jar. But it was the attic door at the end of the hall that captured her attention most. It stood closed, a silent sentinel guarding whatever secrets lay above. She remembered dimly the stories her grandmother had told her as a child, tales of hidden treasures, family mysteries, and secrets kept safe under lock and key. Emily's fingers traced the outline of the door, her curiosity prickling beneath the surface of her fear. What was up there? Boxes of forgotten keepsakes, old letters, or something deeper, something that might explain the shadows she sensed in her family's past? The house was more than just walls and memories. It was a puzzle waiting to be solved. and Emily felt a strange pull to uncover its pieces. Despite the uncertainty, the weight of her situation, and the knowledge that the future was still unwritten, she resolved to face whatever lay ahead. As she stood in the fading light of the afternoon, the house seemed to lean in, as if welcoming her to a new chapter. Emily knew that she would have to confront her fears, her past, and the unknown that awaited in the attic. But for now, she allowed herself a moment of quiet hope, a breath before the journey truly began. The morning sun filtered through grimy windows, casting slanted beams of light across the faded carpet as Emily moved cautiously through the house. Each creak of the floorboards beneath her feet echoed in the quiet rooms, a reminder of how long this place had been left untouched. The air was heavy with dust and the faint scent of mothballs. But beneath that lay something warmer, an unspoken invitation to reclaim what had been forgotten. She had spent the early hours unpacking the few belongings she'd brought, stacking boxes of clothes and baby supplies in the corner of the living room. Her limbs ached from the effort, and the familiar heaviness of pregnancy pressed against her with steady insistence. Still, there was a determination in her movements, a resolve to carve out a space for herself and the child she carried. The house felt vast and empty, its silence both comforting and strange. Memories flickered at the edges of her mind, childhood visits with her grandmother, the smell of freshly baked bread, the soft hum of a lullaby drifting down the hallway. But those moments felt distant now, like whispers from another life she was only just beginning to remember. As the day wore on, her attention kept returning to the attic door at the far end of the hallway. The white paint was chipped and scratched, and the brass keyhole gleamed faintly in the sunlight. It stood like a barrier between the present and the past, holding secrets she couldn't yet grasp, but felt compelled to uncover. Her fingers traced the outline of the doorframe as she passed by, the cool wood grounding her amidst the swirl of uncertainty. She had tried the handle earlier. It was locked tight. But a strange restlessness tugged at her, urging her to find the key and open it. Strange noises from above had begun to unsettle her in the evenings. Soft creaks, the faint rustle of movement, whispers she couldn't quite place. At first, she dismissed them as the house settling, but each night they grew more persistent, like faint echoes of forgotten voices. Emily resolved that she would find the key. The idea sparked a small flame of curiosity amid the fatigue and fear that had shadowed her since arriving. Maybe the attic held answers, or at least a connection to the grandmother she missed so deeply. She began her search in the drawer of the old wooden sideboard in the dining room, sifting through yellowed letters, faded photographs, and bits of forgotten paperwork. Her fingers brushed over a tarnished silver locket, and she paused to open it, revealing a tiny painted portrait of a woman whose eyes seemed to hold both sorrow and strength. The discovery stirred something inside her, a link to the past she hadn't expected to find. She tucked the locket into her pocket and continued her search, eventually finding a small, rusted key taped beneath the drawer's underside. It was the kind of key that felt significant, heavy with history. Heart pounding, Emily clutched the key as she made her way to the hallway. The house seemed to hold its breath with her, the shadows lengthening as the afternoon light faded. She knelt before the attic door, the key cold and heavy in her palm, and hesitated for a moment before sliding it into the lock. The tumblers clicked, and the door creaked open, revealing a narrow staircase spiraling upward into the dimness. Dust motes danced in the air, illuminated by the weak light filtering through a small window high above. The attic was a cavern of forgotten things. Old trunks, stacks of boxes, tarnished furniture draped in yellowed sheets. Emily took a tentative step inside, her senses flooded with the scent of aged wood and musty fabric. She ran her hands along the rough surfaces, feeling the texture of time itself. The room was cluttered, disordered, but beneath the chaos lay a tapestry of stories waiting to be unraveled. Among the piles, she spotted a wooden chest carved with intricate designs, its surface worn smooth by years of handling. The chest was locked, but unlike the attic door, it bore no keyhole. Only mysterious symbols etched deep into the wood. Emily's breath caught. The chest seemed to hum with an energy that made the hairs on her arms stand on end. She circled the room slowly, uncovering stacks of old books with cracked spines, bundles of yellowed letters tied with faded ribbons, and photographs pinned to a corkboard, their faces blurred by time. Each item whispered fragments of a life lived long ago, pieces of a puzzle she was only beginning to understand. A faded quilt lay folded on a dusty trunk, the stitching delicate and worn. Emily wrapped it around her shoulders, the fabric soft despite its age. The attic was no longer just a room. It was a bridge to the grandmother she barely knew, a place where history and memory intertwined. Hours passed as Emily sifted through the attic's treasures, the outside world fading away. The sounds of the house, its creaks, its sighs, became a comforting rhythm, a heartbeat she hadn't realized she'd been missing. Despite the loneliness that shadowed her every step, here she found moments of connection, a fragile thread linking past and present. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows through the attic window, Emily paused to catch her breath. Her body ached from the day's exertion, the weight of pregnancy pressing insistently, but her spirit felt lighter, buoyed by the discoveries and the quiet sense of purpose that had begun to take root. She knew there was still much to uncover, many questions unanswered. The locked chest, the cryptic symbols, the scattered letters. They all promised deeper secrets hidden within the house's walls. Yet, for the first time since arriving, Emily felt a flicker of hope. This house, with all its dust and shadows, was becoming more than a refuge. It was a place where she could begin to heal. As she climbed down the attic stairs, the key still clutched tightly in her hand. Emily resolved to return tomorrow. There was a story here, woven through generations, waiting for her to unravel it. And in that story, perhaps she would find the strength to face her own uncertain future. The house settled into the quiet of evening, the attic door now slightly ajar, inviting her back. Outside, the wind whispered softly through the trees, carrying with it the promise of discovery and the first fragile threads of belonging. The attic air was thick with dust, sunlight filtering weakly through a small, grimy window high above. As Emily stepped cautiously among the scattered relics of her grandmother's life, her eyes caught the glint of something tucked beneath a pile of faded linens. She bent down, brushing away years of neglect to reveal an old wooden trunk, its surface worn and etched with strange, swirling symbols carved deep into the wood. The designs were intricate, almost hypnotic, and despite the layer of dust, the chest seemed to pulse with a quiet energy, like a heartbeat frozen in time. Her fingers trembled as she traced the carvings, wondering what secrets this locked chest might hold. It was unlike anything else in the attic. No keyhole, no latch, just the mysterious symbols that seemed to guard whatever lay within. The silence around her deepened, the house itself seeming to hold its breath, waiting for her to make the next move. For a moment, Emily's mind drifted back to stories her grandmother had whispered when she was a child. Tales of forbidden love and family secrets carefully hidden from prying eyes. She had dismissed those as fanciful then. But now, standing here, the weight of those stories settled heavily on her chest. Could this trunk be the key to unlocking the past? To understanding the woman who had shaped so much of her own story? Setting the trunk aside for a moment, Emily's gaze swept across the attic. Boxes piled high with yellowed letters, stacks of old photographs pinned haphazardly to a corkboard, and dusty books with cracked spines lay scattered in disarray. She carefully unfolded a bundle of letters tied with a faded blue ribbon, the delicate paper brittle beneath her fingers. The handwriting was elegant and flowing, penned in ink that had faded to a soft sepia tone. As she read the words, a story began to unfold. A story of love and loss, of choices made in the shadows. The letters spoke of a secret romance, one that had been frowned upon by family and community alike. Names and dates hinted at a scandal that had fractured the family, creating rifts that lingered long after the letters were written. Emily's heart ached with each sentence, recognizing the pain and courage woven through the words. The woman who had once been her grandmother was more than the quiet figure of her childhood memories. She was a woman who had fought for love against impossible odds, who had carried burdens silently, protecting her family in ways Emily was only beginning to understand. Among the letters, Emily found a small folded photograph, a black and white image of a young woman standing beside a man beneath a sprawling oak tree. Their faces were serene but tinged with a sadness that spoke volumes. There was a tenderness in their posture, a bond that transcended the judgment hinted at in the letters. Emily traced the edges of the photo, feeling an unexpected connection to these strangers, as if their story was somehow entwined with her own. Returning to the locked trunk, Emily felt a surge of determination. Whatever lay inside was important. Perhaps the final piece of the puzzle that would explain the legacy her grandmother had left behind. The absence of a keyhole was a mystery in itself, but she was resolved to uncover its secrets. She searched the attic more thoroughly, lifting cushions, peering beneath furniture, and rifling through boxes of forgotten keepsakes. In an old sewing basket, she found a delicate silver locket, its clasp broken but still intact. Inside was a tiny folded note, its edges worn and fragile. The handwriting matched that of the letters, a clue, perhaps, to unlocking the trunk's mystery. Emily unfolded the note carefully, the words written in a hurried scrawl. For those who seek, the path lies within. Trust in the past to guide the present. The cryptic message sent a shiver down her spine. It was both a challenge and an invitation, a call to delve deeper into the history woven into the very fabric of the house. Her fingers returned to the trunk, searching for any hint of a mechanism, a hidden latch, something that might reveal its contents. Her hands traced the intricate carvings again, and then, almost by accident, she pressed one of the symbols, a small crescent moon carved near the edge of the lid. With a soft click, the trunk shifted slightly, the lid loosening just enough to reveal a narrow gap. Emily's breath caught in her throat as she lifted the lid fully, uncovering the treasure within. Inside lay a collection of journals, their leather covers cracked with age, and a bundle of worn documents tied together with a faded red ribbon. The Taster journals were filled with neat, careful handwriting, diary entries, letters, and notes that spanned decades. The documents included legal papers, photographs, and maps, all hinting at a legacy far richer and more complicated than Emily had ever imagined. She opened the first journal. The pages yellowed, but the words vivid and clear. The entries spoke of struggles and triumphs, of love forbidden by society, and a fierce determination to protect a family's name and honor. There were mentions of sacrifices made, of secrets kept hidden to shield those she loved. Emily felt tears prick her eyes as she read, the weight of her grandmother's story settling over her like a protective shroud. This was more than family history. It was a testament to resilience, to courage in the face of adversity. And now, it was hers to bear. Among the documents, one stood out. A folded letter addressed to Emily herself, dated just months before her grandmother's passing. The handwriting was shaky but deliberate, the message clear and heartfelt. "My dearest Emily," it began. "If you are reading this, then you have found the attic and the trunk that held my stories. Know that I hid these truths to protect you, to give you strength when life feels uncertain. You come from a line of brave women, and within these pages lies the legacy of love, sacrifice, and hope that I entrust to you." Emily clutched the letter to her chest, a swell of emotions washing over her. Grief, pride, and a newfound resolve. The attic was no longer just a room filled with forgotten objects. It was a sanctuary of stories, a bridge between past and present. As the afternoon sun cast long shadows across the attic floor, Emily sat surrounded by the treasures she had uncovered. The locked trunk had yielded its secrets, and with them, a deeper understanding of the woman who had shaped her family's history. The house around her seemed to breathe with life, the echoes of the past mingling with the quiet hope of new beginnings. And as Emily traced the delicate script in the journal, she felt a flicker of strength ignite within her. A strength born from the knowledge that she was not alone, that her story was woven into a tapestry far greater than she had ever imagined. The days that followed were woven with a quiet intensity as Emily delved deeper into the trove of journals and documents she'd uncovered in the attic. Each page revealed fragments of her grandmother's life, a tapestry of courage and heartache that stretched across decades. The more Emily read, the more she felt a growing connection, not just to the woman who had come before her, but to the strength that pulsed through their shared bloodline. Eleanor, her grandmother, had lived a life far more complex than Emily had ever imagined. The journals spoke candidly of a love deemed forbidden by their small, judgmental town, a romance that defied social conventions and threatened to unravel the fragile fabric of the family's reputation. Eleanor's words were filled with longing and fear, but also with a fierce determination to protect her family and preserve a legacy that stretched beyond whispered gossip and closed doors. One entry, dated nearly 50 years ago, stood out. Eleanor described secret meetings beneath the old oak tree behind the house, stolen moments with a man named Samuel, whose family had been at odds with her own for generations. Their love had been a spark in the darkness, but the pressures of society and family expectations had forced them apart. The pain of that separation lingered in Eleanor's words, but so did a stubborn hope that someday the truth would come to light. Emily found herself clutching the journal as she read, feeling the weight of Eleanor's sacrifices settle heavily on her heart. It was a story of resilience, of choosing love despite the risks, and of carrying burdens silently to protect the next generation. The parallels to her own life were unmistakable. The fear of abandonment, the isolation, the desperate need for connection. In Eleanor's story, Emily found a mirror reflecting her own struggles and a beacon guiding her forward. Among the scattered letters and photographs, Emily discovered a faded map, yellowed with age and marked with cryptic symbols. Tracing the lines with her finger, she realized it depicted the grounds surrounding the house with a series of hidden spots noted in Eleanor's meticulous handwriting. A note attached mentioned a legacy that Eleanor had fought to safeguard, something valuable, something she had hidden away to keep out of the hands of those who might exploit it. The idea of a hidden legacy sparked a surge of curiosity and purpose in Emily. This was more than family history. It was a quest, a puzzle left for her to solve. She felt a thrill of anticipation mingled with apprehension, knowing that uncovering these secrets might bring challenges she wasn't yet prepared to face. Late one afternoon, as the golden light filtered through the attic window, Emily sat cross-legged on the dusty floor, piecing together the clues from the journals and map. The house around her was silent, save for the occasional creak of settling wood and the distant call of birds. The quiet was a balm to her restless spirit, a space where she could breathe and think. Her fingers trembled slightly as she unfolded another letter, this one addressed to the family's eldest descendants and written in Eleanor's elegant script. The letter spoke of injustice, a land dispute with a powerful local family, the Blackwoods, who had sought to claim the property through deceitful means. Eleanor had resisted, using every resource at her disposal to protect the house and the surrounding land that meant so much to her. Emily's heart pounded as she read about the legal battles, the threats, and the quiet resilience that had kept the family's legacy intact. The Blackwoods had been a looming shadow over the town for decades, their influence far-reaching and their methods ruthless. Eleanor's fight had been lonely and exhausting, but she had prevailed, at least for a time. The discovery struck Emily with a mix of fear and determination. If the Blackwoods still held sway in the area, her claim to the house and its legacy might not be as secure as she had hoped. The thought of facing such opposition, especially in her vulnerable state, was daunting. Yet Eleanor's story had already shown her the power of perseverance. As evening settled, Emily's children, 2-year-old Lily and her 6-year-old brother Max, joined her in the living room, their laughter a bright contrast to the weighty history she was uncovering. Lily clung to her stuffed bear, eyes wide with wonder, as Emily shared gentle stories about their great-grandmother's strength and courage. Max, ever curious and eager to help, had taken to exploring the garden, convinced that hidden treasures awaited beneath the tangled vines and overgrown bushes. Their presence grounded Emily, reminding her that this house was not just a relic of the past, but a home where new memories would be forged. That night, as Emily tucked Lily into bed, the little girl whispered, "Grandma Eleanor is watching over us, isn't she, Mama?" The innocence in her voice stirred something deep within Emily, a comforting belief that she wasn't alone in this journey, that the past and present were intertwined, guiding them toward a hopeful future. Despite the uncertainty looming on the horizon, Emily felt a growing strength. Eleanor's story was no longer just words on a page. It was a legacy she carried with pride and responsibility. The attic, once a place of dust and shadows, had become a sanctuary of resilience and hope. As she closed the journal and extinguished the light, Emily whispered a silent promise: to honor her grandmother's sacrifices, to protect the home that had sheltered generations, and to face whatever challenges lay ahead with courage and love. The journey was far from over, but with the past as her guide and her family by her side, Emily was ready to embrace whatever came next. The knock at the door was sharp, unexpected, and it sent a ripple of unease through Emily's quiet morning. She paused mid-sip of her tea, heart tightening in her chest as the sound echoed through the old house. The children were playing outside, their laughter drifting faintly through the open windows, a fragile shield against the storm brewing just beyond the door. Emily set her cup down, smoothing her hands over the worn wooden table as she rose to answer. The hallway felt colder than usual, the shadows deeper, as she opened the door to face the stern gaze of her mother, Margaret. The years between them hung heavily in the space, filled with unspoken words and wounds neither had fully healed. Margaret's eyes were sharp, tired, and held a warning that made Emily's stomach knot. "Emily," she began, her voice low and edged with frustration, "I heard you've been digging through the past again. You need to stop." Emily's breath caught. I'm just trying to understand, Mom. There's so much I didn't know about Grandma, about our family. Her mother's eyes flickered with a mixture of anger and pain. Some things are better left buried, Emily. You're stirring up old ghosts that don't need to be brought back to life. The tension between them was palpable. Years of distance and hurt breaking through in sharp edges. Margaret's warning wasn't just about the attic or the journals. It was about the fractures in their family, the betrayals and secrets that had festered in silence. Emily's voice wavered, but grew firmer. I can't just ignore it. This house, Grandma's story, they mean something to me. I need to know the truth. Margaret shook her head slowly, lips pressed into a thin line. You're playing with fire. People around here don't want those old wounds reopened, especially not the Blackwoods. The name hit Emily like a cold slap. The Blackwoods, the powerful family her grandmother had fought so hard against, were still a looming presence in the town, their influence far-reaching and their intentions shadowed in menace. Before Emily could respond, Margaret's gaze softened, a flicker of the mother she once knew breaking through the stern exterior. Please, Emily, leave the past alone. It's only going to bring you pain. With that, her mother turned and left, the door closing with a finality that echoed through the silent house. Emily stood rooted in place, the weight of her mother's words pressing down on her like a heavy shroud. The confrontation stirred a whirlwind of emotions. Fear, frustration, and a deep sadness that touched the raw edges of her heart. The wounds in their family were deeper than she had realized, and the path she'd chosen was fraught with more danger than she had anticipated. As the day wore on, Emily wrestled with the turmoil within. Memories of her own struggles surfaced. The loneliness of facing pregnancy alone, the heartbreak of abandonment, the fear that no matter how hard she fought, she would always be alone in this battle. Yet, intertwined with the pain, was a stubborn ember of resolve. Eleanor's story had shown her the power of resilience, of standing firm against forces determined to break her. Emily knew the road ahead would be hard, but turning away now was impossible. Late that afternoon, a knock came again, this time softer, hesitant. It was Thomas Reed, a young lawyer from the town who had offered to help when Emily first arrived. His eyes were kind but serious as he stepped inside, carrying a folder thick with papers. I heard about your grandmother's case, he said quietly, and about the challenges you might face. I want to help. Emily felt a flicker of hope amidst the storm. Thomas had been a steady presence, offering guidance and a listening ear when she needed it most. Together, they began to sift through legal documents, property deeds, and old court records, piecing together the tangled history of ownership and disputes. As days turned into weeks, their investigation uncovered unsettling truths. Fraudulent claims, forged signatures, and deliberate attempts to erase Eleanor's rightful legacy. The Blackwoods' shadow loomed large, their influence woven into the fabric of the town's history, threatening to strip Emily and her family of the home they had fought so hard to reclaim. The pressure mounted, both from the legal battles and the social scrutiny that followed. Whispers circulated in town. Neighbors watched with suspicion, and Emily found herself the target of veiled threats and cold shoulders. The solitude she had sought in the old house was shattered by the reality of conflict and opposition. Amidst the turmoil, her children became her anchor. Max, with his boundless curiosity, often asked questions about the town and its history, while little Lily clung to her mother with quiet trust. Their presence was a reminder of why she fought, why she couldn't let fear dictate her future. One evening, as Emily tucked Lily into bed, the little girl whispered softly, Grandma Eleanor is with us, Mom. She's helping us be strong. The words settled in Emily's heart, a balm for the weary soul. She allowed herself a small smile, a flicker of comfort in the face of uncertainty. But the battles ahead were real, and the wounds reopened by her quest for truth were raw and painful. Emily knew that to protect her family and their home, she would have to confront not only the powerful forces aligned against her, but also the ghosts lurking in her own past. The road was long, and the cost was high, but beneath it all, a fierce determination burned. For her children, for Eleanor's legacy, and for the life she was determined to build, Emily would face the storm head-on, even if it meant standing alone against the shadows that sought to consume her. The morning mist curled gently around the edges of the worn stone path, leading up to the house as Emily stepped outside. The first light of dawn casting a pale glow over the overgrown garden. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of damp earth and pine. A quiet reminder that this place, old and weathered, still held life beneath its surface. Her children, Max and Lily, trailed behind her, their small footsteps muffled by the soft moss carpeting the ground. It was a day unlike the others, one tinged with cautious hope. After her mother's warning and the mounting threats from the Blackwoods, Emily knew she couldn't face the coming battles alone. That's why today she had arranged a meeting with someone who might be an ally. Samuel Hawthorne, the local historian who had spent decades chronicling the town's forgotten stories and secrets. She had met Samuel by chance at the town library weeks before. His eyes held the kind of quiet wisdom that comes from years spent digging through dusty archives and piecing together fragments of the past. He had listened intently as Emily spoke of her grandmother Eleanor's journals, the locked attic, and the tangled history with the Blackwoods. Now, as he approached the porch with a weathered satchel slung over his shoulder, she felt a flicker of relief. "Morning, Emily." Samuel greeted her with a warm smile, his voice low and steady. "I've been looking forward to this." They stepped inside, the house creaking gently around them, and moved to the cluttered kitchen table where Emily spread out the collection of letters, maps, and journals. Samuel's fingers brushed over the worn pages, his eyes scanning the faded ink with a mixture of reverence and curiosity. "I've heard whispers about Eleanor's fight," Samuel began. "But your discovery confirms there's much more beneath the surface. The Blackwoods have long cast a shadow over this town, and many have suffered quietly because of them." Emily nodded, the weight of that truth settling heavily on her. "I'm afraid their reach is still strong. I've already felt it. Through my mother's warnings, the coldness from neighbors, even threats. I need to understand everything if I'm going to protect this house and my family." Samuel pulled out a folded parchment, the same map Emily had found in the attic, and spread it carefully on the table. "This map shows more than just the property lines. See these symbols here?" He pointed to a series of marks near the edge of the garden. "They indicate old landmarks and, more importantly, hidden spots tied to the family's legacy." Emily leaned in closer, her fingers tracing the faded ink. "Hidden spots? Like a treasure hunt?" "In a way," Samuel said with a wry smile. Eleanor was clever. She knew the Blackwoods would try to claim the land, so she hid documents, heirlooms, and proof of ownership in places only a trusted family member could find. Hope stirred within Emily, mingling with the exhaustion and fear. This was more than she had dared to hope for. A way to prove her claim and perhaps unearth the truth that had been buried for decades. Over the next several hours, Samuel and Emily pored over every scrap of evidence. He shared stories from the town's archives, old lawsuits, letters between Eleanor and allies, even faded newspaper clippings hinting at the Blackwoods' unscrupulous methods. Each piece added depth to the story, painting Eleanor not just as a victim, but as a fierce protector of her family's heritage. As the afternoon sun dipped low, Samuel suggested they begin searching the spots marked on the map. "I know these grounds well. We can start with the garden, where Eleanor mentioned the old oak tree." Emily's heart quickened. The oak tree had been a symbol in the journals, a place of secret meetings and whispered promises. If there was anything hidden there, it could be the key to unraveling the Blackwood's claims. Together, they stepped into the garden, now wild and tangled, the grass knee-high and dotted with wildflowers. Max darted ahead, his eyes bright with excitement, while Lily clung to Emily's hand, sensing the importance of the moment. They reached the massive oak, its gnarled branches stretching skyward like ancient arms. Samuel knelt by the roots, brushing away leaves and dirt, revealing a small, rusted metal box beneath the earth. Emily's breath caught as he carefully lifted it free, the box heavy and cold in his hands. Inside, wrapped in oilcloth, were old documents, property deeds, letters, and a faded photograph of Eleanor and Samuel's great-grandfather standing together beneath the same tree decades ago. The papers were yellowed but legible, bearing signatures and seals that confirmed Eleanor's rightful ownership. Emily's hands trembled as she held the documents, a sense of triumph mingling with relief. Here was the proof she needed, a tangible link to the past and a shield against the Blackwood's threats. But as they returned to the house, Emily couldn't shake a growing unease. The Blackwood's influence was pervasive, and she knew this discovery would only intensify the conflict. Yet, armed with new evidence and the support of allies like Samuel, she felt more prepared to face whatever lay ahead. That evening, as the children slept, Emily sat by the fireplace, the documents spread before her like a map to a future she hoped to claim. The house, once a silent witness to her grandmother's struggles, now seemed alive with possibility. She thought of Eleanor's courage, the sacrifices made to protect a legacy, and the strength passed down through generations. And in that quiet moment, Emily found a wellspring of determination, an unyielding resolve to fight for her family and the home that had sheltered so many before her. The journey was far from over, but with each clue uncovered and each ally found, Emily took another step forward. The past and present were entwined, guiding her toward a future where hope could take root, even in the shadow of adversity. The attic was bathed in the soft glow of late afternoon sunlight as Emily ascended the narrow stairs once again, the worn key heavy in her palm. Her heart pounded with a mixture of anticipation and trepidation. Months of searching, uncovering, and fighting had led her here, to this small, cluttered space filled with the remnants of her grandmother's life. And now, to a discovery that might change everything. She moved carefully toward the farthest corner, where the floorboards creaked beneath her weight. There, concealed behind a faded tapestry, was a narrow panel in the wall, barely noticeable unless one knew where to look. Her fingers traced the edges, and with a gentle push, the panel slid open to reveal a hidden compartment. Inside lay a sealed envelope, yellowed with age and bearing Eleanor's familiar handwriting. Emily's breath caught as she lifted it out, the wax seal still intact, a testament to the care with which it had been hidden. The envelope was addressed to her, the name written with a steadiness that belied the years between them. With trembling hands, she broke the seal and unfolded the letter inside. The words were deliberate and heartfelt, a message from Eleanor written shortly before her passing. "My dearest Emily," it began, "if you have found this letter, it means you have begun to uncover the truths I carried with me all my life. I hid these papers to protect you, to give you strength and hope when the world feels uncertain. You are the rightful heir to our family's legacy, the guardian of the home we have fought so hard to preserve." Emily's eyes scanned the letter, absorbing each word. Eleanor spoke of sacrifices made and battles fought, not only for the land and the house, but for the dignity and honor of those who came before. She revealed a hidden will, a legal document that named Emily as the sole beneficiary of the property and all its contents, a safeguard against those who sought to claim it through fraud and intimidation. Tucked beneath the letter was a bound packet of legal papers, deeds, affidavits, and signed statements that formed an unassailable case. Eleanor had anticipated the Blackwoods' attempts to seize the property and had prepared these documents meticulously, entrusting them to the one person she believed would carry the fight forward. Emotion welled within Emily, pride, sorrow, and an overwhelming sense of responsibility. The weight of her grandmother's legacy rested squarely on her shoulders, but it was also a shield, a powerful tool to reclaim what was rightfully hers and to protect her family's future. As she carefully gathered the papers, a sudden knock at the attic door jolted her from her reverie. Thomas Reed stepped inside, his face serious but hopeful. "Emily, this is it. With these documents, we can finally move to secure your claim. The court will have to listen." Emily nodded, grateful for his steadfast support through the long legal battles. Together, they began preparing the evidence for submission, knowing that the road ahead would still be challenging, but armed now with undeniable proof. But the fight was far from over. Word of the discovery had already begun to spread, and Emily sensed the growing tension in the town. A distant relative, one she had never met, had surfaced, claiming a stake in the inheritance and threatening to contest the will. His presence stirred old wounds and complicated an already fraught situation. The relative arrived unannounced one evening, a tall man with sharp eyes and a smug smile that spoke of entitlement. He demanded access to the house, insisting he had a right to the property and dismissing Eleanor's will as a forgery. Emily stood her ground, bolstered by the knowledge and documents she now possessed. The confrontation was tense, a clash of wills that underscored the stakes at hand. Thomas intervened, warning the man that any attempt to claim the estate without legal grounds would be met with resistance. The relative left with a parting threat, but his visit was a clear sign that the battle for the house and its legacy was entering a new, more perilous phase. In the days that followed, Emily and Thomas worked tirelessly, preparing for the inevitable court hearings. The community watched with a mix of curiosity and skepticism, whispers swirling like a cold wind through the town. Amidst the turmoil, Emily found solace in small moments. The laughter of her children as they explored the garden, the comforting presence of Samuel as he continued to share stories and insights, and the quiet strength that grew within her with each passing day. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the hills, Emily sat on the porch with the letter from Eleanor in her lap. She traced the elegant handwriting, feeling a profound connection across time. "Thank you," she whispered into the fading light, "for believing in me." The house, once a place of mystery and shadows, was becoming a sanctuary of resilience and hope. And as the legal battle loomed, Emily knew that with the truth on her side, she was ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead, determined to honor her grandmother's legacy and build a future where her family could finally call this place home. The courtroom was heavy with tension, its walls echoing with the murmurs of a gathered crowd that had come to witness the unfolding drama. Emily sat beside Thomas Reed, clutching the thick folder of evidence that represented months of relentless investigation, and the legacy of a woman she barely knew but now deeply admired. Her children were safely at a friend's house, a small mercy that allowed her to focus on the battle ahead without distraction. The judge entered, his presence commanding silence, and the hearing began. Opposing counsel, representing the distant relative who had surfaced to challenge the inheritance, presented their case with an air of entitlement, dismissing the documents as forgeries and casting doubt on Eleanor's intentions. Their arguments were sharp, designed to undermine Emily's claim and cast a shadow over the legacy she sought to protect. Thomas stood calmly when it was his turn, his voice steady and clear as he laid out the facts. He presented the sealed letter from Eleanor, the meticulously preserved legal documents, and the evidence uncovered in the attic and hidden spots around the property. Witnesses, including Samuel Hawthorne, testified to the authenticity of the papers and the long-standing struggle Eleanor had endured to safeguard her family's home. Emily watched as the courtroom absorbed the weight of the truth, the years of sacrifice and resilience laid bare before them. The atmosphere shifted subtly, the earlier skepticism giving way to a growing recognition of the injustice that had been fought against for generations. Outside the courtroom, the community's reaction was mixed. Some remained wary, influenced by the Blackwood's lingering presence and reputation, while others quietly supported Emily's fight, moved by the story of perseverance and family loyalty. Slowly, a groundswell of solidarity began to form, neighbors offering quiet encouragement and assistance where they could. Throughout the proceedings, Emily found strength in unexpected places. A local shopkeeper shared stories of Eleanor's kindness and courage, while the librarian offered access to archives that shed further light on the Blackwoods' history of deceit. Each gesture, small but significant, reinforced her resolve. The hearing stretched over several weeks, each session peeling back layers of the past and exposing the tangled web of claims and counterclaims. Emily endured sleepless nights, her body weary but her spirit unbroken. The support of Thomas, Samuel, and the growing circle of allies buoyed her through moments of doubt and fatigue. One afternoon, as the sun filtered through the courtroom windows, the judge delivered his ruling. The room fell into a hush as he acknowledged the compelling evidence presented by Emily and her legal team. He affirmed her rightful ownership of the property, recognizing Eleanor's will as valid and binding, and dismissed the claims of the distant relative. Relief washed over Emily in a wave so profound it left her breathless. Tears welled in her eyes as she grasped Thomas's hand, the weight she had carried for so long finally beginning to lift. The victory was not just legal. It was a triumph of truth, of justice, and of the enduring power of family bonds. News of the ruling spread quickly through the town, sparking conversations and shifting perceptions. Emily found herself greeted with newfound respect and warmth, the barriers of suspicion slowly breaking down. The house, once a symbol of conflict and secrecy, began to transform into a beacon of hope and renewal. In the days that followed, Emily focused on restoring the home and grounds, enlisting the help of neighbors and friends who had come to believe in her cause. Max and Lily explored the garden with boundless enthusiasm, their laughter weaving a new story into the fabric of the house. Evenings were spent reading Eleanor's journals aloud by the fireplace, the past and present entwined in a tapestry of resilience and love. Emily felt a deep sense of gratitude for the journey that had brought her here. The struggles, the discoveries, and the people who had stood beside her. One quiet night, as she gazed out at the stars shimmering above the porch, Emily whispered a promise to the woman whose legacy she now carried. "I will protect this home," she vowed softly. "For you, for them, and for all of us." The house, once cloaked in mystery and shadow, had blossomed into a place of belonging and strength. Emily's journey was far from over, but with her family by her side and the truth on her side, she faced the future with hope and unwavering courage, ready to build a life rich with love, connection, and the enduring spirit of those who had come before. The spring sun poured through the newly cleaned windows, casting warm light across the freshly painted walls and polished wooden floors of the old house. Emily stood in the kitchen, the heart of the home, watching as Max and Lily chased each other through the open doorway into the sprawling garden. Their laughter, full and unburdened, filled the air and wrapped around her like a gentle embrace. This was the life she had fought so hard to reclaim. A life stitched together with hope, resilience, and the enduring legacy of those who had come before her. Months had passed since the courtroom battle that had granted her and her family the right to call this place home. The house had transformed from a silent relic of the past into a vibrant sanctuary where memories were made and futures were nurtured. Each room held a story, some whispered from the past, others written anew by the children's footsteps and the echo of Emily's dreams. She ran her fingers over the worn quilt draped across the back of the sofa, a quilt her grandmother had sewn, now lovingly restored and vibrant with color. It was a tangible link to Eleanor, a symbol of the strength and love passed down through generations. In many ways, the quilt mirrored Emily's journey, patched together from fragments of hardship and hope, resilient and beautiful in its imperfections. The attic, once a place of mystery and shadows, had been cleaned and organized. It now held the journals, letters, and treasures uncovered during her search. Artifacts not just of a family's history, but of a woman's fierce determination to protect her legacy. Emily often found herself drawn there, feeling a quiet connection to Eleanor as if her presence lingered in the dust motes dancing in the sunlight. One afternoon, as Emily sat in the garden with Lily nestled on her lap and Max perched nearby with a book, she reflected on the journey that had brought them here. The fear and loneliness she had felt when she first arrived had given way to a deep sense of belonging. The house was no longer just a shelter. It was a home, alive with love and possibility. Neighbors had grown from distant acquaintances to friends, their support a testament to the community's healing. Emily had organized gatherings and shared stories of Eleanor's courage, fostering a renewed appreciation for the family's place in the town's fabric. The Blackwood's shadow had begun to fade, replaced by a spirit of reconciliation and understanding. As the sun dipped low, casting golden hues across the horizon, Emily prepared a meal with the quiet satisfaction of one who had found her footing. The kitchen table was set with care, and the children's chatter filled the space with a warmth that no hardship could dim. Later, as the house settled into the calm of evening, Emily sat by the fireplace, the journals open on her lap. She read aloud to the children, her voice weaving the stories of Eleanor's struggles and triumphs into the fabric of their lives. The past and present merged seamlessly, a tapestry of resilience that would guide them forward. Lily yawned, her eyes heavy with sleep, while Max listened intently, his imagination sparked by tales of secret gardens and hidden treasures. Emily's heart swelled with gratitude for the journey, the discoveries, and the unexpected gift of this home. Before tucking the children into bed, Emily paused at the attic door, now unlocked and welcoming. She placed a hand on the worn wood, a silent thank you to the grandmother, whose courage had paved the way. The attic was no longer a place of fear, but a sanctuary of memory and strength. As she looked out the window at the stars beginning to twinkle in the night sky, Emily whispered a promise: to honor the past, cherish the present, and nurture the future. The road had been long and fraught with challenges, but it had led her here, to a place where she and her children could finally belong. The house stood quietly around her, a testament to resilience and hope. Within its walls, a family healed, grew, and dreamed. And in that home, rich with history and love, Emily found the peace she had sought for so long, the peace of a life reclaimed, a legacy embraced, and a future bright with promise.